All right, we'll get started in just a couple minutes. If you have topics that you want to have covered, you could enter them in on the comments section. I know we had some people that wanted to see automation, and so if you have other topics that you wanted covered, please feel free to kind of type that in now. There is a little bit of a latency by the time I speak to when you guys hear it. If I'm not as responsive, sometimes that latency and that delay can build up. But feel free to go ahead and start your topics and your questions, and we'll get through as many as we can get through in about 2 hours. First off, I want to make sure that the audio sounds okay. So if you could let me know if the audio sounds fine on your end. So we'll wait a couple minutes. For those watching afterwards, we're just going to get some topics covered that people want to go over. And then we'll go ahead and get started in just a couple minutes. Okay, we have a question from Sir Robert. Good to see you on the Google Hangout. Saying that you just bought the Cubase 7, but you're waiting till the 25, or I'm not sure if it's 25 or but you could go ahead and register it now. So if you're interested in the Cubase 7.5, that will automatically kind of get you your grace period update as of, I believe, October 15th of last year. But I'm not sure if I understand a question of waiting till the 25 to get the new laptop. Good to see you, Jaga. All right, any topics that you guys have? If you want to go ahead and type questions. And also going back maybe to Sir Robert's question about getting a laptop. So once you have the Cubase authorized on your dongle, your e-licenser, you could just freely move it back and forth. All right, wait a couple more minutes, get some more questions, some more topics coming in. So again, any topics you guys want to cover. I know we had some people who want to see automation. Also working with Vienna. Okay, on the 25th. Okay, I understand your question now, Sir Robert. You can go ahead and get it authorized and start working with it now. And then just simply move the e-license or key on the 25th when you get your laptop, so you can get kind of a little up to speed on it. All right, so we'll just wait a couple minutes and we'll get started. See if you guys have topics. All right, so we have some more people kind of joining in. For those watching afterwards, we're just getting some people logged in. And again, feel free to ask any topics you want to go over tonight. Okay, so I see a question from Greg McCarthy about doing the cello, so we could go over that a little bit. right, we're glad that you could catch it, Maurice, tonight. Also, if this, we're just kind of doing this for a convenient time. I know it may not be as convenient for people on the West Coast or for people who live overseas. If there's a better time to do these events, the live events, just, feel free to kind of send your ideas as well. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Some more people logging in. Any other topics you want covered? Okay, so we'll go over the groove agent for Jaga. Okay, there's an OPE singers question. You might want to try to just log back in. You should see kind of a Cubase screenshot currently. Okay, we'll go over the replacing drum recording parts. Okay, we'll go over some of the Vari Audio and Time Warp. If you have more questions, feel free to kind of keep them coming. We'll go through them. Okay, so we see the question from Lawrence Lynn about replacing sounds in Groove Agent 1. So we'll go ahead and we'll cover that. See if there's any more questions, and we'll get started in just about 2-3 minutes. Okay, so some single word delays in automation. We'll go over that. For Michael Kid Gomez, we've had some people run it fine in Snow Leopard. I've seen people running it, but I think you're going to need 10.9 and 10.8. But you could always do 10.9, and it's a free update to get the Mavericks. Okay, so Rick will do swing settings in Quantize. All right, see if there's any more questions. They're just rolling in. We'll get started in just about a minute or so. Okay, I see Lawrence's question about changing MIDI tracks into audio in 7.5. I see Sir Robert's question about anything in the works to change notes within a chord in Vari Audio. At this time, it's currently for monophonic sources. I'm sure there's some German guy that's probably staying up really late as we speak. All right, we're glad that you have video, OPE swingers. Okay, we'll get started in just about a minute. We have some topics built up. Sorry if you hear my neighbor's dog barking in the background. I guess it's Time for him to go out. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So again, there's a little bit of a delay, and sometimes this delay can build up over time. So if you have any questions, kind of feel free to ask them in the comments section. So we'll start off. One of the requests that we had from last time was actually doing automation and kind of working with automation parts within Cubase. So if we wanted to actually just do a little bit of automation here, we can first enable automation by hitting the W and R key. So the W will stand for write automation, and the R will stand for read or play back the automation. So you can toggle them independently, or usually by default now, when you hit the write for the automation, that will automatically engage the read. Now the automation lanes are actually shown directly here in the lower portion. So if you come here to the lower left hand corner of the screen, we can actually now see your automatable parameters. And if you wanted to and usually by default you'll have a volume track, and then you could also just kind of click and add other automation elements directly there from the list. So if I really only wanted to see just my volume automation, we'll start with that. Now, when we actually come over here to we have an automation panel. We usually see this in the upper toolbar here. So as we click, we can now open up the automation panel. The default automation mode here will be touch automation. So let's say if I just have this saxophone part playing, I'm just going to loop this, and then as soon as I touch the fader, it will start to automate. It will start to write automation. As soon as I release the fader, the automation will immediately be turned off. So we'll go ahead and we'll make this a little larger so people can see this. So as I do this, I let go of the mouse, the automation stops, and maintains the current level. Now, if I switch here to auto latch, and we go back, we can now maintain the level when I let go of the mouse until the level is until it's still playing back. And as soon as I stop playback, it would stop writing the automation. So if I wanted to put it into auto latch again, let go, it would maintain that value until I stop and then go back to the existing value right there. Now our third automation mode that we'll have here is crossover. And this is really good for doing quick touch-ups. And you could actually see as I hover over the automation area that I could see the values here. So they are not always kind of an eyesore. So as soon as you kind of hover in that area, it becomes highlighted. So what crossover is going to allow you to do is if we have a line here and I just wanted to kind of bump one little section, I could grab the mouse, make a quick adjustment, and then grab the mouse again. And as soon as I reach the threshold, it'll kick out of the right. So let's say we're in this section right here. So now I grab it, let go, move it up. And as soon as I get to where that automation point was, it will automatically disengage writing of the automation. Now there's also trim mode. So if I come here, this would allow you to set your values here. And as if I wanted to kind of keep the same overall values here, but just kind of the same kind of curve to the automation. That way I could maintain the same curve, and then you could actually kind of go to your function and you could choose to freeze the trim automation mode if you wanted to. Now there's a couple of nice little hidden goodies right over here in the lower left hand corner. So if you click right here on this screen, we could actually say, okay, I want to show data on the automation tracks, and that way I could actually see the waveform here. So if I was being very, very kind of precise with the automation, we could see that waveform reference directly there. Another choice that you have here is to actually show reveal the parameters on writing. So if I had another automatable parameter here, which I can open up, and we'll just call this our standard panner left to right. And you'll see that as I automate this parameter, this little section, as soon as I select the volume, that turns red. As soon as I select the panning, that will turn red. So that way I can see exactly which parameters are being written. Some other handy things that you could do is you could actually choose to have different fill modes. So if I wanted to actually come here and say, okay, I want, let's say I've been mixing a project and I only get to the vocal in the very, let's say the last, by the time the song is halfway through, I could actually put the fill mode here to start. So what this will do, as soon as I grab the value, that will now write that automation data for that level directly from the beginning of the project to right where we are. And we could also choose to do a fill to end. So as soon as I grab this, say that's our level, let go, hit stop, and that would automatically write that automation data directly to the end. And we could also set this with doing our punch in, as well as setting it within the loop between the left and right locators here as well. Now, if I always want to have that turned on, if I always want it into end mode, I could just click on it twice. So as soon as I come here and write my automation, it'll now stick so that whenever I go to another track, that mode will stick. Otherwise, when it's just in once, as soon as I finish writing the automation, that will become disengaged. Now, some other things that are really handy is you could actually suspend reading and writing of different automation elements. So let's say if I have my channel settings open here, and I'm playing along, and I want to automate this, my volume, but let's say accidentally I'm looking for the right EQ. Now what happens a lot of times is you may inadvertently write those EQ changes as automation. But I could actually now choose to suspend reading and writing of the EQ. So this way I could adjust the EQ settings without writing that data as automation. So that way my EQ, I could pick and choose which exact components are written and which exact components of automation are played back. Now also we can have a number of different types of automation tracks. So here I could say I only want to see volume, or I only see pan automation, EQ, dynamics, sends, inserts, or only automation that was actually used within the project. Or you want to one mouse click hide all, or show used, used only. So this way you could quickly navigate and see your different automation functions. So as you can see, you could do a lot of flexibility directly with the automation built into Cubase. Any questions? I know it'll come up a little bit later, but if you ask a question, we can come back to that. I'm just going to check some topics, and we'll go on to some of the questions that you guys have. All right, so let's check out Greg McCarty's question about you recorded a cello part, but the attack on the string sounds rather harsh and abrupt. How can I make it a bit more legato? Okay, so we'll go ahead and let me just switch projects here. I think I have some strings in this project. Let's get this loaded up. All right, so one of the things that can really make a big difference in how the actual parts will be played back, especially for strings, and it could be, and this is really dependent upon the actual sound itself and how it was programmed. So if I wanted to come here, let's see if the sample's loaded up yet. Okay. Now this is from the Halion Symphonic Orchestra, which you get the sound set, which you get as a trial version inside of Cubase. So often, if you come here, one of the things that you could do if the attack, and this again really depends on how the actual sample was taken into account, but sometimes just simply adjusting the velocity of individual notes can do that, and that can make it sound perhaps depending how the sound was programmed. Now, one of the problems that is really difficult with a lot of programs and a lot of string samples is when they have different articulations, and with the different articulations they actually may have different sample sets that are kind of running in parallel. So we had invented a technology called VST expression map. So if I wanted to go to this cello sound, I could go to a spiccato, tremolo, pizzicato, expression, legato. So these sounds that come with the Halion Symphonic Orchestra sound set, which again you get as a trial version, you could actually just come here and switch between these different articulations. So if I come here, I could actually just say, okay, we want to switch to our note expression. And let's say if I even wanted to take just a violin part or a cello part, doesn't really matter. And now as I play back, and let me just solo or violin part here so you can hear it. So here I could have them all kind of by default as spiccato, but if I wanted to switch particular samples, let's say, okay, now I wanted these to actually be, we'll say legato. I could come here and just look at legato line, and as I do that, I could line it up visually here and say, okay, let's add legato. And then let's say the next notes I want to be pizzicato or trill, tremolo, pizzicato, back to spiccato, back to pizzicato. So if we want to listen to this, we can now seamlessly kind of switch between the different articulations. And what's even kind of cooler about this is when we go into our notation editor, we could actually see all the articulations automatically kind of mapped out for you. So again, if depending on how the sound is actually programmed for your MIDI device, sometimes just changing the velocity may make it a little more legato, or you may want to experiment with some of the different key switches. And often when you have key switches, they show up as kind of the lower notes on a keyboard that are often out of range of the actual instrument. So you could actually sometimes just hit a MIDI note and that would switch it to a different sample set that has different articulations. Instead of just having those as MIDI notes that show up here within your notation view, you could actually just simply have all of your articulations managed here, which is why it's really popular with many different composers, and there's a lot of different sample libraries that have this support built in, and there's presets that you could download from our webpage for a number of different libraries. All right, so let's move on to the next question. All right, this question is from Jaga. So let's take a look at Groove Agent SE. And this is kind of a really exciting drum machine that's now included with Cubase 7.5. So this is kind of a classic sampling drum machine. Now, one of the things that it's going to offer is also the ability to have, I'm just going to add another one as an instrument track here. So we'll come right over here to Groove Agent SE. And this is, if you look at it, it's kind of very similar to Groove Agent 1, but it's going to add a lot more capabilities. So we'll come here to the Groove Agent SE, and I'm just going to add a new instrument track for that. And we could actually load up different kits, and we could actually load up kits with associated patterns with it. So if I just want to come here, I'll find a particular kit here. So say I wanted to do my Urban Ballads kit. Now, once I have my samples loaded up here, there's also an entire pattern bank. So as soon as I come here, I could actually, let me just load up the kit with patterns this time, sorry. So now you can have patterns, and these patterns can actually just be triggered by MIDI notes. And you can see the MIDI note assignment right here. Now, by default, you could have, say, sync to beat, and you could have the different play modes right here. But as soon as you kind of just simply now hit play, you can now just trigger an actual MIDI note right here. And as soon as you stop, that would automatically start. So you could try out and actually just trigger from different MIDI notes the different patterns. Now, what's interesting about this is you could also have this, as soon as you send a MIDI note to it, it could do it. It could automatically switch to pattern on the next beat or directly on the next measure. Now, some of the do with the Groove Agent SE, one of the things that's really powerful is this concept that a lot of people really love the sound of the 12-bit samplers because they had a certain grittiness about them. So if I wanted to come here and we'll listen to my Groove Agent SE, what's cool is you could actually have different playback modes. So we have kind of a beat here, and we'll do kind of just a standard playback resolution. Or I could switch to vintage, and this would actually mimic the sound of a 12-bit. Or you could actually switch to turntable. And what turntable would allow you to do is to actually get the sound of a 33 RPM record sampled at 45 RPM and then slowed down to spin. This is a common technique to save on sampling space. So you can hear a little bit of aliasing going on, some artifacts. So you can switch between these different playback modes. Now, kind of working with these samples is also very easy as well. So if I wanted to take, we'll put this back into our standard playback mode. And if I wanted the kick to be louder or softer, or if I want to change the start time on a particular sample, I can just grab this and truncate the sample. Or if I wanted to actually do some creative things with pitch, I can now select the pitch, and as I come here, I'll solo just my bass drum. You could adjust the envelope amount here. And get all sorts of different kind of sounds. And what's even kind of more interesting is you have 20 levels of undo here with that. Or if you just wanted to do coarse tuning. Or let's say I want to take one of the percussion elements here. I could solo that, and let's just make this a little louder so it might be a little easier to hear. And I could, when I go to my pitch tab, I can now just randomize the pitch. I'll select the pad here, and now we'll just randomize. So it was one sample now. Let me just adjust the volume down of the bass drum there. Now you could also apply filters on particular instruments as well. So if I want to come here, I could say I just want to filter just on the selected drum pad here. Or we could actually do an entire drum kit as well. And run the entire kit through different filters. And this is all completely automatable, or if you wanted to have no filter. Now, one of the things that we also want to do is to give an entire mixer section. So we could have a number of built-in effects. So if I wanted to have my studio EQ, or we could have 4 different accents, and each accent could have 4 different effects. So if I wanted to have, let's say, a reverb just on the hand claps, I could come here, go back to the edit, and now I could have my 4 accents right here. And that way you could have 16 stereo outputs into the mix engine, but you could also have a number of effects just standard right here within the actual plugin. Some other things that are really handy is for kind of building your own drum sounds. And what's really handy about this is, let's say if we have a number of snare drums, let's say if you were working with a live drummer and you wanted to kind of make a kit, a sample CD out of their kit. This is like, let's say, the same snare recorded at 8 different velocity levels. So if I wanted to take all those snare drums, I could just drag them from my media bay or from my project window directly onto a pad. Now as I drag, you'll see 3 different icons. You see one square, 2 square, 3 squares. 1 square would place them all into the same pad, all 8 samples. We have our 2 squares, which would replace existing samples with these samples. Or if I wanted to spread these across multiple pads, I could just hit my 3 squares. And now each of the samples is now mapped to its own pad. And if I wanted to undo that, we could just click on the undo. And again, you have 20 levels of undo there. So I want to select these and move them all to D1. So I could see my 8 different samples broken down directly here. And these are our velocity values, which can be graphically adjusted as well. So as soon as I come here, and if I click lower, we could go through our different velocity values for the snare. but I may not want it to follow velocity levels. So if I wanted to, I could also just do a round robin, so that every time I hit the snare pad, it'll just cycle through all the different samples. Or if I want it to be a bit more random, every time I hit it, it'll just play back a random sample, regardless of what velocity I'm hitting. Now, random could also include repetition, so if I wanted to, I could have random exclusive. And that would have no repetitions of samples. If I have a recording, let's say if I have a multi-track recording of a drum kit, and let's say this instance I have 3 different kick drums. I have that one, a Yamaha sub kick, as well as another kick mic. What I could do now is also just grab my range selection tool, and I could just select those samples and drag them onto a pad. And to get the kick drum sound I was thinking of, and then if I wanted to kind of just choose my start point for each of the different drum samples here, we could just choose our start point. And instead of, to get the kick drum sound I was thinking of, what I would want to do is just to choose layer. And now I could have all 3 of those kick drums just automatically layered right here. So very, very easy. And so any sample, and this works the same way with Groove Agent 1, you could just drag and drop the samples directly onto the actual pads. Now, working with loops, if I wanted to come here, it's another very popular thing to work with. So if I have a kind of generic sounding drum loop here, and what I could do now is, if I have, let's say, a blank instance of Groove Agent 1, I could drag and drop that loop as a sample. Now, usually when we work with samples, we're going to have the same tempo for the loops. So if I actually, it's going to trigger back that audio file at the same tempo. So if I actually switched my tempo to, let's say, 144, I can now just come right here, and it's going to play back the same tempo regardless of what my project tempo is at, unless I come here to the sample tab and enable audio warp, and we'll put it on musical mode and have it sync to the tempo. So now whenever I trigger that sample, it's now playing at 144 beats a minute. Now, another mode of working with loops is working with slices. So if I come here, I can now actually choose create slices, and where my one loop was on just one pad, I click create slices, and it's now automatically just mapped these directly across. So I have my hi-hat, snare, hi-hat, probably kick, and it's now mapped all of those directly to my project window. Now, if I wanted to, I could just drag from this little icon right here. I could drag that part directly onto a MIDI track that's routed out to it. So if I wanted to play my original audio loop, I can now trigger the individual samples as slices right there. And a lot of people go, okay, that sounds exactly the same. But now what I could do is come here, and I could actually just change the MIDI data. So say I want to take this loop here to the Cubase MIDI editor, and I'll just use kind of my arrow keys to randomly change. And this way we have the same sound and the same groove, and we could have a natural variation. So I could have now we'll have the samples. First was the audio. Now we'll have our variation. back to the original. Now, as soon as I've done that, what we saw earlier with our patterns is when we did the slices, that automatically made a pattern. If I wanted a variation on that pattern, I can now just trigger that variation. And again, I could just come here, go to my virtual MIDI keyboard. Let me see if I can find the right octave. And then we could actually just choose to trigger the actual patterns here. So if I wanted to come here, let me see if I can find the right MIDI notes. But you could just trigger those directly from MIDI and have your variations. And that way one note could trigger your loop and have it automatically perfectly synchronized with your tempo of your project. All right, so we'll move on to next question. Let me see if there's any comments or questions we need to go over again. All right, so let's go ahead now, and we had a question about using Groove Agent 1 with let's just take a look here real quick. Okay, so using kind of Groove Agent 1 with Beat Designer. So Groove Agent 1 is kind of the predecessor to the Groove Agent SE, so we'll go ahead and just kind of add an instrument track here. So let's say we'll do Groove Agent 1. So you see it'll be similar in a lot of ways. And since Groove Agent 1 SE doesn't necessarily have the patterns based in it, what we could actually do is we could actually just kind of load up your kick, your different pattern sounds and kits here. And now as a MIDI insert effect, we can just come right here and have Beat Designer. And what Beat Designer allows you to do is to actually program a beat. So Beat Designer doesn't actually work with changing sounds or anything like that, but it allows you to program different beats. So shut off my virtual keyboard here real quick. So let's say we'll just we'll have our Groove Agent, and so we'll open up our Beat Designer again. So now I could just come here and program probably the world's worst beat. All right, so now let's say if I wanted to adjust velocity. And let's say I just want this to be all right. And just accidentally did away with that track. All right. So when we come here, let's say I just wanted to come here and I could actually find my different patterns here. So if you wanted to kind of just randomly drag and change some of the patterns. Now, what else you could do is if you click on the bottom of the notes here, you can actually have different flams. So if I come here, I could add different flams right here. So now if I wanted to play, let me just slow the tempo down here, make it sound a little. And you could change the velocity here. Now there's also different swing functions here. So if I wanted to, you could actually just adjust your different swing fields. So you could have two different swing patterns right here. So if you wanted to just kind of take that and adjust the different swings, Now, if you like kind of what's been created, you could now actually just insert the pattern at the cursor, and that would automatically just place that pattern directly on your timeline, or you could place it between the left and right locators. So if you find that you have a sound, let's say for the Groove Agent 1 here, so let's say if we have the Groove Agent 1 SE, and you really want a particular kick drum sound, again, all you have to do is just grab like a range selection tool and just drag and drop, and you could have that sound directly on the pad. You could also do that directly from the media bay inside of Cubase, and then you could actually just save it as your own different kit. So a lot of times it's very easy during a session, if you have a live drummer, to just drag and drop and have a pretty well done sample library of their drum kit pretty quickly. All right, so we had a question. I think we had a question about doing some maybe drum replacement. Let me go back and review. Now, if you're doing a multi-track drum recording, something that's really quite interesting, and you wanted to kind of beef up some of the different drum kits, there's a great technique for this with using hit points. So let me just find a particular project here. And let's say I wanted to kind of beef up the sounds very quickly of an existing recording. So I have a drum kit loaded up here in Groove Agent SE4, the Maple kit. So it's kind of very much an acoustic kit here. And let's say, first off, I'm just going to leave that kit selected there. And we'll go ahead and just listen to our drum recordings. So we're going to have our kick and hi-hat starting off. Now what I could do is actually just double click on the part, and this is one of the other things that you could do in the sample editor, is kind of, we had that question as well. What can you do besides the Vary audio? There's some really cool things, and one of them is going to be the hit point detection. So as soon as I come here, we could see that we'll have the hit points kind of automatically detected. But as you do this, if we listen to just this track, we can hear kind of the hi-hat bleed through. I'll just turn it up the volume here just a little bit. So there's, inevitably when working with a live drum recording, you're going to have different tracks bleeding through, like the snare or toms. So I may not want to include all those things if I want to do some MIDI triggering. So instead of buying and spending a lot of money on third-party triggers, we thought it'd be better if you could just adjust your threshold here. So what I want to do is just adjust the threshold to leave the kicks, and this is almost like a noise gate, and we just want to leave the kicks in and kind of get rid of the hi-hats and the toms and the snares. And right here, we could actually say, let's create MIDI notes. So I'm going to click on Create MIDI Notes. And then I could use the original dynamics, or if I wanted to all be a fixed velocity, I could do that. And I'm going to choose these on the first selected track, which is the track I had originally routed to that Maple drum kit in Groove Agent SE. And I'm going to go to my pitch here, and I'm going to set that to C1. So now I hit OK. And as we've done that, it's now created that MIDI track directly on our Groove Agent track here. So I'm going to mute my 3 kick drums here. And now we just have the kick drum from the Groove Agent SE. But the original dynamics and original feel from the actual drum kit. And if I wanted to do this for the snare, as well. We'll just kind of come right here and do the same process. So let's find some real snare hits, adjust our threshold. So we're not going to have the hi-hat, which is often bleeding through. And I'm going to say create MIDI notes. Come here and let's choose D1. And now as I do this, I have both the kick and snare on the same track. I'm going to mute the snares from the audio. So now, even if I want to come here and just tune the drums, I could select my kick. So say I want to tune the snare. There's nothing worse than having a kick drum that's like, like tuned to an E flat when the actual song is in the key of E, to really kind of make the low end energy kind of sound really bad. But now I could take the original audio and have those tracks augmented with the samples. So I could do this for each of the toms, the hi-hats, and just kind of replace sounds. Now, one of the things that was added in 7.5 is once you select a track or once audio has been recorded, it's automatically going to do the hit point detection in the background. So if I wanted to come here and navigate, I could just hit, if I hit the wrong keyboard shortcut, I could just hit Alt-N. So if I have my kick drum selected, this will automatically take me to the next hit point. Or if I wanted to go back, I could hit Alt-B for back or Alt-N for next. So now I can navigate by those hit points. And unlike other programs, when if I wanted to actually change those different elements, I could actually set my threshold. And as I adjust my threshold, those hit points would also be tied directly into my navigation as well, through navigating through the different transients and the hit points there. Now, some other things that you could do that could be really handy. So, as people mentioned, there's the Vary Audio tab, so you could actually do pitch shifting and pitch correction. So I'm going to do like the entire bass here. All right, so now we could actually kind of just look at our bass line. So this is one way that so I want to just solo track, listen to the bass. And if I wanted to change particular notes, let's say if we changed the key, we can just so this way you could just change notes. That's one of the things that you could do within the audio editor. You could also come over here, you could have the definition. So if you wanted to automatically place the track into musical mode, what type of grid you're working with. Now, something else that a lot of people don't really experiment around with is also there's some really powerful audio warping features. So you could actually place this track into musical mode, and that will allow you to kind of have it speed up and slow down. But something else that a lot of people miss is the free warp. So if I wanted to come here and kind of zoom in on particular notes, I could actually just kind of drag particular notes. So I could say, okay, let's make this note longer, or let's take the end of this note, drag it out. So you could actually just kind of do your time stretching directly there within the sample editor. So the sample editor will allow you to do hit points as well as kind of working on particular ranges of the audio, and also your different processing. So if you have offline processes, And this is something else that a lot of people kind of miss. Let's say if we have our bass part here, and we'll just go ahead and play. And I'll just take this little phrase here. All right, so I want to actually just grab that as my range selection. And now I could right click and I could process. So if I wanted that to say fade out, I could just come here and do kind of a fixed process. So we want to listen to that fade of those parts. So if you want to change the dynamics, or if you wanted to process it another way, so let's say, okay, let's just reverse it. So if you want to take like a part of the guitar or drums and just reverse it. So you can make it kind of sound like a fretless bass, or you could also do different plugins. So you say, okay, I just want to take this and do a bit of EQ, or let's add some, let's say, some modulation effects here. So we could actually just say, let's add a little bit of chorusing, and now we could actually just process that offline. Now, as I play this, now, once I come here, I could actually now go to my offline process history from the process menu here. And I could actually just remove individual elements even after saving the project. So if I say, okay, let's listen to that, but let's just take the reverse out. I could remove that, again, even after saving the project. And now if I wanted to listen to it, I could just come here and we'll play. So this can make it a little bit easier, or if I just wanted to come here, we could also just say, okay, I want to remove the chorusing or replace the chorusing with a different plugin preset. So very, very easy to kind of make edits and not worry about them being kind of committing you to particular sounds. If I wanted to do all of my processing, I could also choose to flatten. That would render all the different effects or the vocal tuning to a new file. And plus, you could also come over here, you could look at different statistics for the audio file, as well as a spectrum analyzer. So if you wanted to kind of see what's going on frequency-wise with that file. So you could do a lot more with the sample editor than, again, just being limited to just doing the very audio. That's one very powerful aspect of it. But there's a lot more kind of under the hood there. Okay, so let's take let me go through some of our questions here. And if you guys have topics, feel free to kind of keep asking more questions, or if there's another topic you want me to go over. There's a little bit of a delay here, so we'll go ahead. So we're a couple minutes behind here. So we had a question about that. Is that Hallian exclusive? I believe that was probably in regards to the string articulations. No, that will work with any library, but sounds created in Hallian will that have key switching will automatically generate all the expression maps for you, but you could use it with any sample library. All right, I think we had a question about doing a delay on one particular word. So let me scroll back through some of the... I had a question from Michael Kid Gomez about what OS. I'm running Windows 7 on this computer. I also have Mac OS as well. So the one that you're seeing is Windows 7. Okay, so we had a question about like a single word delay in automation. So let me go ahead. I think I have a nice little R&B track we could pull up here. Let me just find this here real quick. Okay, this one I was thinking of. All right, so there's a couple of different ways that you could do delays just on a particular note if you wanted to. So let's say we'll just take our lead vocal here. Listen to it.
The way you whisper softly in my ear, I love you.
All right, so let's say we'll take that, just that little end of the line there.
You whisper softly in my ear, I love you.
All right, so we have some effects on here, so I'm just going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and bypass those so we can hear it dry. Okay, so this will be
in my ear, I love you.
all right. One way of doing this is to just select that phrase, and we could do this from the main project window as well. And you could say, okay, we're just going to select that phrase right there, and then as we could right click and go to plugins, and then I could just say let's add a mono delay, and then we could have this kind of automatically synchronize. Let's say I want it to be quarter note delay, and I'll choose process, and we'll see how this sounds.
You whisper softly in my ear, I love you.
So that's one way of doing it. Now another method would be to if we add an effects channel track. So let's say if I wanted to now come over here and I wanted to add an effects channel. So let's add a mono delay. It could be any type of delay. Okay, and now if I wanted to have this plugin just kind of go right here, I'm going to go to my aux end, turn it on, and now we can kind of just set our level. So as we play,
My ear, I love you.
so I'm just going to set this as a quick little loop range. Now, a quick way of setting like the left and right locators, if you have a selection, so I just grabbed this with my range selection tool, but if you hit the letter P, that will automatically set the locators directly around that part. So now I can loop this section over and over again. So we'll listen to it.
You whisper softly in my ear, I love you.
All right, so what I want to do now is to just enable writing of the automation. So just like what we did earlier, we'll click on the W for writing the automation.
You whisper softly in my ear, I love you.
All right, now we probably had that track soloed with a delay. So we'll try this now.
You whisper softly in my ear, I love you. I love you.
And I'll just set that delay to, let's say, a quarter note delay as opposed to. So now, as you do this, this will just simply automate that effects end.
You whisper softly in my ear, I love you.
So that's a couple ways that you can do, just having delays on one particular phrase. So really kind of easy and kind of fun. So you could do it either way. And as you do the processing, you could also add length on the end for tail so you don't get a sudden drop off with that. So that's a couple of different ways of adding the swing or adding kind of delays to one particular word in a vocal. Now we had a question about doing some swing quantize. So there's a couple of different ways of doing swing quantize, and one of the ones that I like is actually just using one of the MIDI plugins. So there's a lot of different MIDI plugins. Let me see if I have this one project still that I could show you this on. All right, I think I'll just go back to our first drums here. So let's just jump back to our Groove Agent SE project here. Okay, so we'll activate this project. All right, I'm just going to revert it here to all right, so if we have just some MIDI data here. So say we'll take this little drum, and let me just go ahead and see if I quantize it very annoyingly to straight 16th notes. Now, when people kind of work with different quantizing options, this is really could be kind of an art form. So if I wanted to, you could just kind of choose to quantize, and I'm just going to do this as straight 16th notes, and we'll probably lose a lot of the feel. So if I want to take that, I could also just open up my quantize panel. So if I want to choose 16th notes, you could actually choose a percentage swing. So as you do this, it's going to automatically just kind of shift the notes appropriately. So now if I quantize, you can get different feels, and that will actually kind of move the actual notes. Now, another method that I like to do a lot, if you have something that's very straight, is just go to a MIDI insert here. And then there's an actual quantizer plugin. This won't actually change the data, but what you can actually do is you have a swing feel here that you could just kind of adjust, and this will modify the playback in real time with different swing feels. So again, if I just take that completely off, it's a little more suburban, a little more urban there. Or again, just by going to your edit and going to the quantize panel and just choosing your swing there. So that's kind of coupled with the swing here, so I'll take that off. So where we were before, kind of very straight. So straight, swing. So, and then, one of the other things that a lot of people miss is also, let's say if you have a particular drum loop and you really like the feel of that loop and you can't really extract it from within the MIDI domain to kind of match that feel. And sometimes people use drum loops specifically for different feels. So if you go to your hit points here, and let's say you just adjust your threshold here, we can now choose create groove. And then once I do that, I click on that icon. Now when we open up our quantize panel, that loop's feel is automatically extracted directly as a preset that we could use to quantize any other audio or MIDI data to. So that way you could actually take an existing audio performance and at that point extract the feel of that and save that as your own kind of groove quantize template, which is very powerful. So a number of ways of kind of getting different swings within the quantization options built into Cubase. All right, let me scroll back through some of the questions here. All right, so we had a question on converting a MIDI track into an audio track. There's a number of different ways of doing this. So let me just see if I can come here, find a project that, okay. All right, so we'll take this project here. So there's a couple of different ways of taking your MIDI and turning it into audio that could be really pretty fast. One of the ways is to just come here, and let's say if we have a Rhodes part. And that's the MIDI part here. So one way to turn that into an audio part is there's always going to be a freeze option as well. So if I go to my VST instrument window, I could actually just come here and click on the snowflake, and that snowflake will automatically choose to freeze that file. And that will render it as an audio file in the background. Once you do that, though, you can adjust your you can't really adjust the MIDI data unless you unfreeze it. So you have to be kind of set in stone that that's kind of what you want it to be, because you could unfreeze it and then refreeze it, but you can't really edit it right off the bat. Another way of turning this into audio is to just come here. We could set the range. So I'm going to select this event right here, hit the P key. And what's cool about that is we're going to set the left and right locators. We could solo the track. So say I have that track soloed. Go to my file menu, choose export audio mixdown, and let's give it a name. So I'll call it Rhodes. And then I'm going to select these two options here, import into pool and import into audio track. So once you select import into audio track, it'll automatically select the pool there. And at this point, I'll hit export. All right, and then what I want to do is uncheck channel batch export, my fault. And now I'm going to choose to export. And what it's going to do now, it's rendering that file quicker than it takes to play back. So it's about 3-minute song here. So it's going to convert this as an audio file, and it's going to place it directly within the project, and usually places it at the bottom of the project here. I think it's a little slower because I'm doing this and being online, and so it's usually a little faster, but we'll just bear with me for a second here. All right, and almost done. So now that's going to render that file. We could import that, copy it to our working directory. We'll cancel this. And now here's our image of our stereo Rhodes. And if I wanted to, I can move this up and place it directly underneath. So that way we have those two files. And if you wanted to, you could group those together. So when you move one, that they're automatically grouped. So just a Control G, I believe Command G on Mac, and that would group them together. Now another method that comes in really handy is using some internal busing. So if I wanted to come here, I wanted to add, let's say, a group channel track, and I'll make it a stereo group, and we're just going to call this a drum bus. All right, and I wanted to add within my VST connections window, I could also add another output here. And this output doesn't have to be connected to anything. And we'll just call this drum out. Okay. So we'll kind of create, like, we could do this through like phantom busing or phantom outputs. And then we'll come over here. I'm just going to add, let's say, the Groove Agent SE. All right. So now when I come here, I could take the outputs of the audio here and choose to route it to my drum output. Or I could route it to my drum group. So either way, it will accomplish the same thing. So now I want to add an audio track. And we'll add a stereo audio track. And for its input, I could choose either my groups or my output. So I have this routed to my drum out. So now if I wanted to just play back, I'll load up a kit here. And we'll come here. What you're able to do is to, as you kind of play back the audio here, we can now record the audio back into its own plugin. So at this point, your MIDI track, as we would come here. So I'll place both these tracks into record. And then let's just add, I'll just trigger it from my MIDI keyboard here. So let me just set my Groove Agent here. Okay, so I'll just kind of trigger this, and as I have any of the audio coming, I could just place this track and record, and as the virtual instrument generates audio, I could just record both the MIDI data and the audio simultaneously. So that's one method of being able to kind of internally bus the audio in real time. So this is really handy, especially if you wanted to play, like record MIDI data and the audio from the virtual instrument at once. Now, a really handy way of getting your project out to other people. Let's say if I have a large project and it has a lot of virtual instruments, and I don't want to do this kind of one by one by one by one, etc. We could use a channel batch export. So this would allow me to, so let's say if I have a number of different elements, I could go to my export audio mixdown. And then we could click here on our channel batch export. Now, as soon as I do that, I could select not only my VST instrument channels, all of my audio channels here, my different effects channels, so my reverbs, my delays, my snare verb, my group channels, my output channels. And at this point, what you could do is just simply choose to export. And you also have the option here to create a new project. So once you do this, this could now render every single element within your mix, including all the virtual instruments, as their own audio files, and they would all be the same equal length of the audio file. So this is a way, if you were a film composer and you have like 50 or 60 different tracks and you wanted to turn those all into audio with one mouse click, you could just kind of, or a couple mouse clicks, you could say, okay, I want to take all my VST instrument channels here and export. And you could also, again, choose to import those into the existing pool and as audio tracks into the project, or create an entirely new project that you could hand off to anyone else so that they could play back, and all they have to do is start all the audio files at the same time. So a number of different ways of kind of turning your audio into MIDI, or your MIDI data into audio. All right, let's take a look at some of our questions that have come in. All right, so we had a question about different pan law settings. And this is a powerful aspect of Cubase. So when we come over here, if we go to your project setup, we can now come directly over here. So you go to your project menu, right click, and go to project setup. You'll see a little element here for your pan law. So we could actually see your stereo pan law here. I believe it defaults to minus 3 dB. I could be mistaken, but I believe it'll default to minus 3 dB. And as we combine two different sources together, if we double the volume, let's say taking a left and a right channel, and if we combine those, it would be an increase of volume of 3 dB. So a 3 dB gain is a doubling of the sound volume. That's what you get from adding a left and right channel. But some people like to kind of experiment with some different pan laws. So when you pan an element all the way to the far right or far left, if you don't want to lose any of the signal based on the 3 dBs of physics, you could set it to equal power. Or if you wanted to have a wider sounding mix, I know some engineers prefer to work in minus 6 dB because they could really get a very kind of wide sounding mix that way. But those are just different ways of setting your pan laws and how you want those to be dealing with, so that as you pan to the far left or far right, that you can have equal power, or goes down by minus 3 or minus 4.5 or minus 6 dB. So just kind of experiment with some of the different settings for the pan laws, and you could kind of get a pretty good idea of what it's doing sonically to your mix. So minus 3 is usually the default, but some of my favorite engineers use minus 6 and choose Steinberg products because they can have the different settings for pan laws, and they feel that's like a little secret trick that they have in their bag of tricks. So. All right, I saw one question about with OS X with 10.9 installed. One thing to make sure is that you have the latest Core Audio to ASIO device, and also that your audio interface is kind of up, has the latest drivers as well. There's some changes with that. So now we had a question about bullet pointing the videos when you put them up on YouTube. I'll go ahead and put some of the topics covered during the videos in some of the search criteria for the online Hangouts here, so we could kind of go back and do that. All right, so the next question we had was about doing film scoring. Okay. And kind of working with video. Then also about, we'll get into the recording tool next. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll do a little bit of scoring to video. We have a video project here. So one of the things that's really handy is when you come here, is you could add a video track within your Cubase project. And then as soon as you add your video track here, it will show up on your timeline. And I have it set to where my video track actually, we see the thumbnail window here. And you could open up the video window directly here by going to the video player or hitting F8. So now as you kind of play back your project here, wherever you're at, you can see the video window directly in the system.
Life can be free and beautiful. Don't give yourselves to brutes. It's rich. The way of life can be free and beautiful.
Now, if you're scoring to video, one of the problems can be that the video editors often don't necessarily, do all of the video edits based on what's going to work in your timing of your parts musically. So they may cut off half a second here, 10 frames there, or cut out just, one scene because of, maybe it's, not, there's something in the background or it's not, working. So sometimes, video edits and, they try to be very kind of nice and easy for people, for the film composers, but there's always going to be little edits that kind of crop up. And one of the things that is really handy with Cubase is the ability of kind of using the time warp tool. And using this with video. So if I come here, we could actually just choose where, let's say at this scene, I wanted bar 1 to fall right on this visual cue. So let's find just a different cue here. It's Charlie Chaplin video. So let's say right from that cue, I want measure 11 to fall right there. So what you do, we'll just do this one, measure 13, right at that video cue. And let's say between here and this video cue, I need exactly 4 measures. So I can say we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I need to do is to just drag, and using the time warp tool, I could drag measure 17 to fall to right there. So this way, instead of having a really unnatural measure of a 7/8 measure followed by 3 measures of 4/4 to get it to fit musically, I could just stretch and I could see what the time is based on a video. So now I could choose, okay, I want measure 13 to be right at this video cue right there, and then when it scenes, I want this cue to end right here. So that way you could actually pick and choose exactly where the files are, and this will automatically regulate and do all of the tempos for you. So that makes a big difference in kind of scoring to pictures. That's a great video tip that I could pass on. So using the time warp tool, now you could line up the measures to the actual video elements as opposed to the other way around. So that could save you a lot of time. So you could work in kind of natural measures and a natural meter and still have it synchronized to the video cue. All right, so we had a question about using this kind of hard one to do in this format, but kind of using the online collaboration tool. If you haven't really messed with this is a really powerful tool called the VST Connect SE. So we come here, and this would allow you to have kind of your different, so you could actually see me in the webcam here, and we could have different setups here where people could record remotely. So if I log on here, it would give me a code, and I could give a person this key code, and then they could actually, at this point, if they've downloaded the VST Connect Performer software, at this point they could actually record and track directly into system. And it's kind of using, and you have the ability of kind of setting up your cue mixes here. It's a little hard to kind of show in this environment, but this way you could actually track people remotely. Perhaps in a future session, we could actually perhaps try to do this in person, but it's a really kind of slick tool for doing online collaboration. There's also the VST Connect Pro, which you could do up to 16 tracks of audio. So really cool for doing the online collaboration. All right, so we'll go on to some other further questions. All right, so we had a question in Beat Designer if we could do different meters, like having triplets in one and having another one with straight like a 4/4 feel. So let me see if I still have this open here. Jump back to our drum program here. So within Beat Designer, what you would need to do is to, I think, run two different Beat Designers. So if you wanted one to be more triplet feel or one to be more kind of straight 4/4, you could do that as well. So I think you would just need to run two different instances of that. But if you use the drum editor within Cubase, and the drum editor is also incredibly powerful, we can now come over here. If I select this part, and to get to a drum editor, one of the things you could do, if you have like the Groove Agent SE, you need to actually have a drum map set up. And then one of the preferences so if I come here, I can have my Groove Agent SE map, and then we'll just hit OK. Now, as soon as I have that drum map set up, let's say for this track right here, I'm going to select this, and we'll choose the and one of the cool things about the VST3 instruments is I could actually create the drum map from the instrument itself. And once I do that, you see that this changes to grids. So if I come here, we could actually double click, and once it's set up and it has a drum map defined, there's a preference, and usually by default the preference is engaged so that the drum maps as soon as the drum map is turned on, it will automatically go directly to a drum editor. And within the drum editor here, I could actually say, okay, I wanted this feel to be more of an eighth note triplet. And as I would paste in the notes using my drumstick tool here, this would automatically paste it at. So let me just see if I could just come over here. As I would paste it in, it would automatically just be able to kind of paste it in at your different values here. So you could have different feels directly within the actual drum editor. So as you enter in data, you can come right here and just set in your different feels within your drum editor here. So one, you could have like an eighth note triplet for your hi-hats, but quarter notes for your kick and snare as you kind of enter in your data. So that's a powerful way to do it if you don't want to run two different instances of the Beat Designer as well. All right, so we'll take a look at some of our further questions. All right, so we had a question from Maurice. Maybe if you could just reiterate this. How do I put my own samples and create patterns to switch between? Is that within Groove Agent SE? If you could clarify that, that would be helpful, and we'll come back to that. All right, so we had a question about being able to use different MIDI events within the key editor. Is this possible in Cubase? Yeah. It's a really simple thing to do inside of Cubase. So let me just switch to a different project here real quick. All right, so say we'll go back to our classical piece here. All right, so if you wanted to see multiple events, so you could double click on a single event, and by default that will take you in a MIDI track, and usually by default, and this is changeable as a preference, that'll take you to a key editor. But if I have multiple parts selected here on my project window and just hit the enter key, you can now see the different parts here, and you could switch between the different voices here. So you'll see it kind of grayed out, but you could also choose to colorize. You have some coloring options here. So you could actually say, I want to colorize by MIDI channel. So when you switch, you could see the different MIDI channels here. Or if you wanted to actually just do it by different parts, so you can have the flutes be one color, another color for oboe, etc. So this way you could actually kind of see all of your different parts, or if you wanted to see it by the grid or different velocity, or colorized by pitch. So this way you could just instantly switch between your different parts laid out for you in the MIDI right there. All right, so we'll go through some more of the questions here. All right, so we had a question about if you cut an audio track and move them together, will it automatically create a crossfade? So let's come over here, let's jump to this project. All right, so as soon as I come here, and let's say I cut the lead vocal, and now when I move these over top of each other, they don't automatically create a crossfade. So what you want to be able to do if you want to create the crossfade is just do that and just simply hit the letter X, like the crossfade. And you can see the crossfade there. And if you wanted to edit the crossfade, you could choose to. So we edit the crossfade. Now, if you run into this situation, and this happens on Windows, where as soon as you open up a different window that the program gets smaller, we get this question a lot. All you have to do is just to manually maximize that. And now when you double click, you can just double click here. And here you can set your fade ins and fade outs. If you want them to be independent of each other, you could just uncheck the equal gain. This way you could have different fade-ins from different fade-outs. And if you wanted to kind of zoom in here, you could also just choose to kind of move the crossfade, or if you wanted to trim the crossfade right there. So if you wanted more of a fade in than a fade out, or vice versa. So you could just simply kind of come there, but just overlapping the two won't do a crossfade until you hit the letter X and that will actually instantiate the crossfade. So really, really powerful crossfade editing inside of Cubase to kind of get edits seamless between them. All right, we'll take a look at some further questions. All right, so we had a question of how do you transfer a track from one project into another? And this is a really simple thing you could do in Cubase. Is if you have like a couple of different projects open. So let's say if I wanted to come here, and now I have this project, and I wanted this drum loop to be in this project. All you have to do is literally just drag from one project directly into another project. And you could get this folder, the little preference, you could turn this off if you wanted to, but you could copy it to the working directory if you wanted to. Just hit OK. And now you can have your file directly in the other project. So, and you can do that not only with a single track, but you could do multiple tracks as well that way. So very powerful. And, you know, I've done a lot of kind of classical recordings where there's, you know, multiple takes, like, you know, 10, 12 takes. And then you're taking, you know, measures 3 and 4 from take 11, take, you know, the next 2 measures from take 9, the next 3 measures from a different take. So you just kind of have one project window, drag them over and crossfade to multiple files. And it's really fast to have the 2 different projects open. And when you go to open a project, if you didn't want it to instantiate all the plugins, so let's say if I choose here to open a project, you'll get asked if you want to activate the project. So if you choose no, you could have all the audio files where you could have access to them without having to wait for all the samples or different plugins to actually load up. So it makes it very fast and easy to kind of drag and drop project files, and you can do multiple files, MIDI parts, automation from, you know, I believe automation, but you can do definitely your audio MIDI parts from one project directly into another project. All right, let me kind of go back through some of the questions, make sure I didn't miss some of the questions here. All right, so Greg McCarty had a question on using the score editor. So if you want to come here, let me just jump back to one of my projects. Now, one of the problems with dealing with a lot of MIDI parts when you go into translating them into notation is that, you know, a lot of notation programs like everything to be perfectly quantized. And it's very easy to notate something that has perfect quantization. Now, often what that means is it has a very unmusical feel. You know, with the exception of perhaps like some Baroque music and maybe, you know, some EDM music where you want maybe like your early 80s kind of synth pop where you wanted, you know, where the feel was really based directly on the actual like low PPQ resolution. But you know, a lot of times you don't necessarily want that feel. So a lot of people that are dealing with notation from MIDI, one of the things that they have problems with is having something that has a natural musical feel that translates accurately into notation. So if I wanted to come here, let's look at this Rhodes part here. So if we listen to it, and we'll turn on our click here. So it feels really good, like it's on the beat. But if we actually zoom in, we can see that the keyboards are generally a little bit ahead of the beat. So we'll kind of play. But it doesn't feel like it's rushing. It doesn't feel unmusical. But when we go into the notation editor, it could often look something like this, which is exactly what you're not looking for. So if I wanted to double click here just to the left, we could open up a whole staff settings dialog box here. So I want to go to my staff settings, and this is kind of where a lot of the goodies are held. So first thing I want to do is to define my key. I think the song's in A flat, so we'll just come right there, define that key. And then you could also say, okay, I want this to be it's a piano part, so I want it to be a split staff, so where I have a grand staff and I want C3 as the split point. Now here, what I want to do is we have a concept called appearance quantization. So I don't necessarily want to affect the actual note placement because I'd like how the rhythm feels musically. but I want it to be able to be accurately notated as if it was quantized. So what I could do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to turn off the auto quantize. I'm going to say the smallest rest I intended was an 8th note rest. The smallest note I intended was a 16th note. And then these little interpretive flags here, I usually check and find these work really well. So once I have that kind of set up, I'll just hit apply. In a matter of seconds, you could just say, okay, let's say I even want an 8th note rest or 8th notes and quarter note rests. So now you could just kind of apply, and you could see that you could have parts that will be much more legible musically to that. So if I want to come here, none of the notes have changed. If we go back into our editor, so if we want to look at the same data, those notes are still right there. When we go to our score editor, it looks so much more like traditional music that you'd want to actually pass on. Now what's interesting is from the score editor, we could also, if I want to do a quick lead sheet, I could select all of my notes, just standard Control or Command A, and click on the little C7 icon here. And then at that point, it could actually just lay out my different chord progressions for me. You have tons of different symbols here. So now you actually, with 7.5, we actually have an inspector tab. So if you want to do like quantizing or expression maps, so you don't have to necessarily go back to your typical MIDI editor. You can just kind of do those functions here. Or you could click on the symbols tab. And here you're going to have all of your typical symbols that you would expect, your dynamics, different note symbols, articulations. But also under other, you could have just standard text, but you could also have lyrics. And if you click on lyrics and just kind of hit this and hit the tab key, that will automatically just take you to the next note. And one of the other things that's very powerful is this concept of a layout tool. Because a lot of notation programs, if you move the note here, that actually affects the rhythmic value of the note. So I say, okay, well, I want that note to be visually there. That changed it to the to beat 4. I didn't want that. What I wanted to do is to instead we have a layout tool, and as I just grab my layout tool here, I could choose to move an element visually without affecting its actual rhythmic value. So if I come here, I could just move that, or if I wanted to do something like indent. Now, if you find that, you could have a default number of bars here, but if you find that is too much, you could also just kind of come here, or if you wanted to just grab different modifier keys here, say, okay, I want a little more space or less space between the lines, holding down the Alt key, or I think maybe the Shift key, we can just change that particular one, or the Control key. So very, very easy to kind of work with that. And if you wanted to go to the end of a line, you could actually just grab your glue gun here. If you wanted to take the next line back up, or if that's probably too busy to be legible to a musician, you could just grab your split tool here and just kind of cut and space it out how you want to very easily. Now, if you're working with actual instruments that transpose, like brass and wind instruments, you could also just double click here just to left, open up the staff settings. And if you wanted to print this out, we're in the key of A flat, but if you wanted to print it out for trumpet, we could actually just do your orchestral transposition right here. So we could just say, let's just make that for trumpet, and now you'll see it'll go from A flat to B flat. And that will handle all of your orchestral transposition, plus everything that we saw earlier with the articulations. We could now just kind of come, we can come directly here and handle all of your expression maps, and your articulations can automatically be inserted here. So if you wanted to just switch from the score editor, within the score editor, to pizzicato or legato, you could do that all directly right here. So very powerful scoring capabilities already in Cubase. Many people know that we've kind of started a whole research project with the former development staff of Sibelius. So we'll see some great things coming. You could check out Daniel Spreadberry's blog from the Steinberg website on the progress, but that's really exciting technology that's going to be coming. All right, let's take a look at, see if we missed any other questions here. If you guys have any other quick topics, we have about 10 more minutes that we're going to go. All right, so we had a question just about how to beef up a chorus and kind of make it sound a little better, a little fuller during the chorus. Usually the chorus, by definition means that you have more singers, more harmony parts in the chorus versus a verse to kind of feel like the track is going somewhere. So definitely kind of harmonies, if you're doing like a vocal part, can make a big difference. Adding different instruments. One of the things I like to do a lot in the MIDI domain is to kind of double parts up octaves, maybe layer different voices, but or different like string voices and have a different sound up an octave higher or an octave lower. So I tend to do that a lot, but we'll give you kind of an idea here. We look at like the verse. So you can see dynamically there's fewer instruments, and as we're kind of approaching the chorus, we can see that we'll have like different background vocals kick in.
All at once you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make you feel good?
So that's obviously adding more instruments, doubling parts up, and being careful that they're not kind of muddying up the parts, and and often a very typical thing is to add different harmony tracks as well to kind of make the chorus kind of stand out a little more. All right, let's go through a couple more, see if we have any more questions. Let me just scroll through, see if I've missed any questions. If you have any quick questions before we wrap up here, we'll go ahead and feel free to kind of pipe in the comments field. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that kind of come in. We have a little bit of a delay for those of us who are kind of watching it after the live presentation. We'll see if we have more questions coming up here. See if I missed any previous questions. All right, we'll wait a couple more minutes, see if we have more questions coming in. All right, if there's any last minute topics you want covered, feel free to kind of go ahead and ask. You can type it in the comments field. For those of us that are kind of watching it after the fact, there's a little bit of a delay from when we kind of start to where we are. So we'll just kind of see we're about a minute or we're a couple minutes behind. I think last time we got about 15 minutes behind. Not sure how that happened, but this is a little more responsive tonight. Any other topics, questions? Did everyone learn a couple things? All right, so we had a question on track versions. We'll go over that. Okay, we'll go track versions. Anything else? Thank you for the kind words. This is a lot of fun to do. Yes, we're happy to have Daniel and his team. So, all right, so let's go ahead and cover track versions. All right, so track versions are a really kind of interesting way of working with parallel tracks. We just open up a new project here. All right, so many times when we're working, let's say, with a live band or coming up with different MIDI tracks, it's very common for a lot of us to use different tracks that are often kind of perhaps sometimes duplicative. So if I wanted to come here, let's say if I wanted to record a live band, and I'm just going to actually trigger this through our output buses like we showed earlier. So now what I want to do is I'm going to select all 16 tracks, right-click, and I'm going to say Move Selected Tracks to New Folder. And this enables me to do something called group editing. So I'm going to have a different... we'll come right over here, and I'm going to play just, let's say, a pattern here. I'll just turn that down just a little bit. And what I want to do is I'm going to arm all these tracks we're recording. And then I'll just record, let's say, 8 measures of 16 tracks. Okay, let's say this is a live band. It could be any audio. This is just kind of generating audio files here for us. All right, and let's say now I want to record like the second take from a band. I could go to my project menu. I could go to my track versions and choose new version. And let's say this is our second idea. So let's say this one has like triplets in the toms. And we'll do another 8 measures of this idea. And again, this could be a live band, jazz ensemble, orchestral group. And now I could also, from the track versions, just click right there and choose new version. And let's do kind of a third version right there. So So this is more of a swing pattern. All right, and let's do just one more pattern, and I can just hit Control-Shift-N. That will give me a new track version. So if I don't actually see it, I don't hear it. So let's have this as our pattern here. Now, if I have all the tracks selected, or if I actually come here and have my group editing, what this is going to allow me to do is to actually just switch between take 2, take 3, take 1, and all those tracks in parallel will switch accordingly. Now, let's say I have this one, and I just select, I'm going to disable the group editing. I can say I want the kick drum from take 3. And we'll just come here, put this into loop. And let's say I want the open hi-hats from take 4. So I could just go right here, just in the name, and switch to different versions. And these versions could be labeled as well. So just come here and say open hat for that version. So if I wanted to come here, very easy. Again, I could just say, okay, let's just grab different takes. But if I wanted to assemble, like 2 measures from one take, 2 measures from a different take, etc., I could just use my range selection tool. But I could come here and I could actually duplicate that version, or I could make a new track version. I'll go to the second one right here, and we'll choose a range selection tool. And I'm just going to come down. I'm going to select those measures from that take, and I'm just going to choose to copy. Go to this my comp one, and paste. And I'll just kind of come here and say the next 2 measures from take 3, and I'll just do the keyboard shortcuts now. Copy and paste. And let's say from our open hi-hat pattern, copy, paste. So now I could have take 1 followed by take 2, and then take 3 with the swing feel, and then take 4 with the open hi-hats. Now, one of the other things that you could do is it's not limited to just doing audio tracks. So if I come here, let's say if I have MIDI data, I'm going to take like this part here, and we'll just go ahead and play this. And if I wanted to take my harp part here, I can say, oh, I had a different idea. Let me see what that sounds like. And you could switch between the different track versions just on a single track if you wanted to. So this way you don't have to have another track with different parts and maybe have 2 of them playing at the same time. And all of your effects, all the routing is automatically taken care of. Now this also works with the chord track. So I select my chord track. Let's say I want a chord track in A major instead. Or I want one that's like kind of an F sharp circle of fifths. Come here. Or if I wanted to have different tempos, I could also have different tempo tracks. So if I want to come here, let's say, oh, what would this feel like if it was actually speeds up? Or a different tempo map, more of a Celrondo. So this way you never really have to make a decision. You could just have all sorts of different tracks and try out different combinations until you actually find exactly kind of what you're looking for. But this way you could keep all of your sketches of ideas and be able to kind of call them up anytime that you want. So you have total flexibility with MIDI tracks, audio tracks, time signature tracks, tempo, as well as your chord tracks. All right, let's see if there's any last minute questions before we wrap up. Thank you everyone for the kind words. It's a lot of fun to do. All right, see, okay, track versions, okay. Thank you for the kind comment on my pay. So I have my review in a couple weeks, so we'll see how it goes. But Steinberg's been great. Let's see. Okay, well, I'll wait another minute or two to see if we get caught up, but we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'd like to thank everyone for hanging out and doing the Club Cubase Google Hangout. It's our third one, so I think we're going to try to do it probably the first Tuesday or Wednesday in while we're in May. So we're trying to do it then. So we're going to kind of aim for the first Tuesday or Wednesday. You could we'll get it posted here. So if you sign up to and subscribe to the channel here, we'll get it posted here. Or if you get signed up, probably on the Steinberg Facebook page, or if you wanted to also make sure that in the US that you're signed up for all of our email blast, we'll have all the details for when the next Google Hangout is. You can also leave like topics you want covered on the Google Hangout page. You could leave it in this and it will get to me. But any topics that you want to cover, we're happy to try to do as much as we can in this format. It's not always the best format for everything, but hopefully I think we can all get a lot out of it. So thank you guys very much. If there's any last minute questions, I'll hang out just for one more minute and then we'll call it a night. We'll get going home. Thanks again for hanging out, and this is really a lot of fun for me as well. So, and it's all the better. So, tell your friends that, if they want to see this, or if there's another time. I know this is probably a more convenient time for East Coast people than West Coast people. We might be able to do one on a weekend if that's more amenable for time, so we could get more people, or maybe do a West Coast time next time. So if time zone is an issue, let us know. But we're trying to do 7 p.m. Eastern. That's generally where I am when I'm able to do this on the East Coast, but I do travel a lot. So if time zone is an issue, just kind of let us know. We'll just hang out for another minute, see if any quick last minute questions come up. And if not, we'll call it a night. Just hang out a little bit. And of course, this will be online as well. So probably in a couple hours. So if you want to go back and watch this over and over and over again, you could do that. And there's a whole slew. There's about 7 or 8 hours of tutorial videos on the Club Cubase channel, or you could also go to the Steinberg software channel as well. There's great stuff to learn. So this is obviously a really great way to kind of learn tips and tricks and really get the most out of your software. All right, let's see if there's any more questions. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up, but I would like to thank you guys again. This has been a lot of fun. And if you have any other tips or suggestions or topics, again, just please let us know, and we'll be happy to try to get as much covered as we possibly can. Thank you very much.